I call the March 4th, 2025 Planning and Zoning meeting for the City of Clermont to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Tedona.
Here.
Commissioner May. Here. Commissioner Colby.
Here.
Vice Chair Nemec.
Present.
Chair Bain.
Here.
Commissioner Kramer.
Here.
Commissioner Hoisington.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Wonderful. Please rise for as you are able, for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I believe commissioners do have the minutes from the February 4th, 2025 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'm sorry. I make a motion that we approve the minutes from the February 4th, 2025 meeting.
Moved by Commissioner Hoisington. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Colby. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Minutes are approved. As a reminder, this is, well, not as a reminder, this is our first one this year. The city has started streaming their own streaming service on the city's YouTube channel. And so this meeting is our first meeting that is going to be streamed. So we have been asked by IT just to make sure that when you are speaking, that your microphone is on. So that's the red. It should be illuminated red. And then when you are not speaking, to reduce any noise or overlapping background noise, please turn it off and make sure it's blue when you're not speaking, because it will pick you up and it will broadcast and it could interfere with anyone watching the streaming service, hearing any presenters or anyone else who's speaking and recognized. Okay. With that, we will move into reports. Commissioner Tedona.
I've done some side research on a couple of things that might help the city council out. Probably part of the training, I'd like to kind of know what more I could do on my own, or to kind of get some feedback from folks in the town. But still learning, but getting there.
Wonderful. Thank you. Commissioner May.
Just that I attended I witnessed the multi-hull, which was I guess they were like 30 or 40 boats, and that was incredible. I thought that was kind of nice and enjoyed that with my child. But other than that, nothing else.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you. Commissioner Colby.
No report.
Thank you. Vice Chair Nemec.
Yes, I'd like to thank Wayne and the AV squad for bringing us up to the modern ages. Okay, instead of relying on a second source. All right, I just want to know when it's possible for the public to chime in by raising their hands so they don't have to attend the meeting if they have no transportation here. Please come to the microphone.
Well, and I think that that's going to be a city council policy that they're going to need to implement to allow for that, but we can have Wayne provide any feedback on that.
Mr. Wayne, if you could elaborate on that for me, please.
You know, he did that on purpose.
Just keep in mind that Clermont's watching you.
Wayne Fountain, IT Director for the City of Clermont, what he said.
Okay, thank
So,
you, sir.
yeah, that is a decision for them, and we can do that anytime.
Thank you, sir. So for anybody watching, it is in the near future. So if you have no transportation coming to a city council, planning and zoning, and if I believe code enforcement as well, you're more than welcome to watch it on our news service. And once again, like to put out a big thank you to the AV and Wayne for knocking us out of the ballpark. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Commissioner Kramer?
Yes, last meeting, we approved, MEI Partners LLC requested a conditional use permit for some property over on Mineola, and one of the big concerns the board had was that there was a child care center located adjacent to it. I've walked past that place every day now for 2 weeks, and it's closed. So there's no daycare there anymore, so it looks like it's open property. So that was something that we were all a little bit concerned of putting mixed-use entertainment right there. So I was just reporting back. It's good to see that.
Wonderful. Commissioner Hoisington?
Sure. I attended the Montgomery Center of Excellence Black History Program on, I think it was February the 11th, where they honored the mayor, the police chief, as well as the first African-American postmaster. It was a very, very nice event, very well attended. They recognized other businesses in the South Lake County area that have been doing some outstanding things in the community. Also participated in, I want to thank Chief Broadway and Clermont PD for their Honor the Fallen. That was a phenomenal event with over I think about 800 that participated. So I would invite everyone next year to run, walk, but at least support that event because it's for a worthy cause.
Absolutely. Thank you. To piggyback off of that, I was happy to see that the city did some recognition during African American History Month, and they actually read a proclamation at the last meeting. And I know some council members recognized some of their Black history heroes and stories and shared that at the meeting, so that was good. As we move into March, recognize the strong and positive role models of our females, and as we celebrate Women's History Month in March. I know I certainly wouldn't be where I am today without my mother and my stepmother, so I give them props. And being a child, having only 3 siblings and having them all be 3 sisters, I would be remiss to not also recognize them, because I'll be in trouble if they hear this if I didn't. And finally, I'll say, laissez le bon temps rouler. Let the good times roll. Today is Mardi Gras and Fat Tuesday as we enter the Lenten season. Tomorrow starts with Ash Wednesday and culminates in Easter Sunday. So enjoy your king cake tonight, and hopefully you will find the small little baby inside your king cake. Do any staff have any reports? Okay, if not, we will move to item 1. Item 1 is resolution number 2025-0008R. Consider a request for conditional use permit to allow for a boat dealership and repair in the C2 General Commercial Zoning District, Regal and Nautique of Orlando. And Mr. Henschel.
Good evening, Planning and Zoning Board members. Kurt Henschel, Planning and Development Services Director. The applicant, Regal Nautique of Orlando, would like to open a new and used boat dealership and a boat repair within an existing building at 102 South US Highway 27, which what you're looking at. Wayne, if you would zoom out just a little bit, please. Thank you. Perfect. So what you're looking at here, this is Highway 27. Right up to the top is actually Citrus Tower. The actual Citrus Tower itself is right here, so this is right across the street at this location. This is just a zoomed-in location. To the back here would be Bloxham, again, Highway 27 over here. The property and building was previously used for an animal feed store, formerly known as the Irish Trails Farm and Pet Supply. The existing building was constructed in 2002 and is approximately 15,000 square feet. The building has a loading dock and a large warehouse doors on both sides of the building. These doors would allow larger deliveries like boat motors and other large equipment, as well as an access point to display boats internally inside the building. In addition, the applicant would like to have an outdoor display area of new and used boats within the existing parking lot. The property is zoned, let me show you where that's at. So again, this is just a site plan of what you saw just previous picture. This represents the building. This represents the new and used boat display area out front. The property is zoned C2 general commercial with a commercial future lane use. The property does face US 27, which is an arterial roadway and is buffered from the Bloxham Avenue in the rear by the site's stormwater pond. The applicant will be fencing off a portion of the existing parking lot for boat display. This area will be on the north side of the property and will eliminate 18 parking spaces. Based upon the current parking code, a building this size for retail use is required to have 45 parking spaces. With the removal of the parking spaces within the boat display area, there will still be 47 parking spaces existing. A condition of approval for this display area is that ornamental fencing shall be used around the outside boat area. That's around this area right here. This will look similar to the fencing used in the business to the south, which is the rental depot equipment area. Staff has reviewed the application and the proposed project in regards to section 101-212 review criteria for a conditional use permit. The proposed use will not be detrimental to the health, safety, and general welfare of the community. The use of the site is not out of character with existing neighbors or adjacent properties. The conditional use permit will not be in conflict with the Clermont Comprehensive Plan goals, objectives, and policies for the current land use designation. Therefore, staff does recommend approval of Resolution 2025-008R. I believe in your packet as well. This is actually a picture of the front of the existing building. The shaded area just represents where the boat sails. The new and used boats will be stored over here. And this just represents what the fencing around that area would look like. With that, that's staff's report.
Thank you very much. Is the applicant present? Okay, if you would like to come forward and introduce yourself, your name and address, and if you have anything you'd like to add to the presentation this evening.
Hello, my name's Jeff Huseby. I've been in the marine industry for 33 years in Central Florida. Mark Hooker and I are partners at Nautiques of Orlando. We've been in business since 2008. We are two-time boating industry top 100 dealer of the year for North America, and just 2 months ago was inducted into Boating Industry Hall of Fame, which is pretty strong accolade. There's only 6 dealerships in North America in the history that have done that. We feel like Clermont has really grown, and there's a lot of lakes around here. We have our Staples store in Orlando, and we feel the need to expand into the Clermont community with sales.
Okay. All right. And please, if you wouldn't mind, stick around for any questions. We're going to open this up for a public hearing and then bring it back to the commission.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone here in the audience that would like to speak to this item? Please come forward to the podium and state your name and address. Again, this is a public hearing. Is anyone here to speak on this item? If so, please come forward and state your name and address. Okay, seeing no one, we will move it back to the commission. And for this item, we will start with Commissioner Colby.
Thank you, Chairman. I just have a question on the nature of this outdoor boatyard that you're creating. Are you seeing this really as an outdoor showroom, or is this like where you store boats? Like what is the nature of this fenced-in area?
So our main objective is to have a sales center here. It's definitely not to store boats. The fenced area out front would be for sales boats, and there's quite a large showroom that we would have boats inside as well. We look for something on the highway with good road frontage, and this location worked out very well.
Okay, so you could say it's an outdoor showroom is what you would call it.
I think there's ability to put 2 or 3 boats outside there, and then additional boats inside the gated area, and then the rest would go inside.
All right, that was my only question. It's always nice when we have good companies look at Clermont, so thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, we'll start next with Vice Chair Nemec.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, sir. If you mind, please come back to the mic. Thank you. To piggyback off of Commissioner Kobe's question, when you said, it's going to sound like a joke, but it's not, sales, did you mean S-A-L-E-S or S-A-I-L-S?
Yes, selling boats.
Selling boats. Okay, good. Now, because,
Yeah.
all right, that's number one. A question for staff. Wasn't this approved recently for a school? Or is the school next door to it in that location? I'm just,
Not at this location.
not at this location? Okay.
This was a school?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I've got schools everywhere, I don't recall this one.
I wish we had, honestly, on that comment, I wish we had schools everywhere. We don't have enough in Clermont.
Dale Ladd, 1135 East Avenue. I own the building. My brother and I do. Yeah, it was approved, almost not in the last year, for a school for autistic kids.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we tried to make that work, and they did too, but the requirements to retrofit this building came out to in excess of $1 million, and they could not afford to do it. The requirements for a school are overwhelming, so they just weren't able to do it. And the reason we wanted to see that happen badly, and that's why we sat there for 9 months trying to work it out with them, and they just couldn't do it from a financial point of view, which is kind of sad.
It's kind of sad, but thank you for explaining that, sir. Okay, well, actually, the owner, if you come back here, I do have a question for you. How long has this building been vacant?
A year this month. Last March, yeah. And we've done in that year, we've had the opportunity to do a tremendous amount of maintenance on the building. New roof, all paint, all the interior. Yeah, we put a lot of money in that building, getting it ready to, when you have a feed store in there for almost 20 years,
Correct.
bad things happen.
I understand that, sir. Thank you.
Anything
Thank
else?
you for, not that I have. To the applicant, if you did get approved, what would be your start time on fixing it up to your specifications, you might say?
I mean, we have a plan in place pending your approval, and
Well,
we
it's the
would,
city council's approval, sorry.
yeah, and so we would want to get going as soon as possible. As we get into the springtime, that's prime selling season for boats.
Okay, good. That's what I was looking for.
Yep.
And, before in your presentation, you said that you have locations all around the nation. How many locations do you have in Florida?
So we have 2 locations that are directly across the street from one another in Orlando in the Sodo district. We just built a state-of-the-art, it's a Nautique only. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Nautique Boat Company. They've been in Orlando since 1925.
Correct.
I've been with them for 33 years. So Nautique is our main brand. Bennington Pontoons, which is a premier brand. Also Regal Boats, which are made in Orlando. So we're kind of like the hometown dealer.
Correct. Sir, also, number one, so you'll be leasing the building, you will not be buying the building.
Correct.
Number two, pretty much this is a question that I'm going to be sharing with you and staff. Okay, your display of boats, we already determined that it's going to be for sales, not sailboats. Will you be having sailboats in that display?
What, pardon me? What
Will
kind-
you be having, I'm sorry, will you be having sails, S-A-I-L-S?
No sailboats.
No sails, all powered boats?
No sailboats, all power boats.
Okay, so
Yep.
don't be no masks and,
Either outboard engines or inboard engines. Yep.
okay. And pretty much, you're going to be staying in the diagram in my packet, which is yellow?
Correct.
Okay. Question for staff. I went back to a regular council meeting, because I noticed across our desk, of May 2020, May 25th, 2021. All right, when, God rest his soul, Mr. Purvis asked, Mr. Purvis, he pretty much asked the question to the applicant of the rental depot, if any of the equipment will be facing 27. His answer, it's right here in black and white, and it's also on the video and audio, is no. I drive by there practically every day, and they got everything displayed but the kitchen sink. Not only do they have it displayed, but they also have it, if it's a cherry picker, to its full extent. So I would like to know what we're planning to do it if the applicant gets approved and decides to move the boats from the side now facing 27. What are the repercussions?
We can condition it to this site plan. This site plan showing the sale area here. I'm not only getting into it, but I recall them having a display area on the rental depot as well. So I
not in the
understand what you're
minutes.
telling me. I just tell you on my side, I recall them having a specific.
That must have been
display
changed
area.
behind closed doors because it wasn't changed in the public.
Yeah. But another discussion, another time. This site, we can
Okay,
say
you're right.
it's for.
I'll agree to disagree. But my question is, if this gentleman gets approved by us and gets approved by city council and decides to put this display right along 27,
It's going to be conditioned to this, what's in front of you.
and the
this box.
repercussions are, I'd like to hear them.
It'd be in front of code board then.
Okay.
No.
Okay, great. Do you see anything, any time in the future, sir, of you moving this display facing 27?
There's a billboard sign on 27. So, I mean, I can display my brands right there.
I'm talking about the boats itself, sir.
I don't see that.
Okay, I wanted that for the record. Okay, and I noticed that according to the pictures and passing by, that the islands have trees. Are you planning to keep the trees there, or you'll be removing those trees from the islands?
No, I think the site, the way it's set up, is very adequate.
Perfect. I have no other questions for now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Kramer.
Thank you. I love the idea of this place going in here, just stating it for the record. I'm a boat owner, I love boating, and I live very close to this piece of property, and there's nothing else in that area for me right now. If I need a part or a piece, I'm driving to the 15 minutes to the other side of Clermont, and usually don't get what I want, so I ordered on Amazon and wait 2 days. I've watched this place sit empty for the last year, and it looks like, to me, a pretty good use of changing property that's earning no revenue, sitting there, creating no income for us. It was a feed store. A little concern right now that I have is changing the use. You're very close, behind that property is residential community, very nice residential community, and you're going to be doing boat motor repair, is that correct?
There's going to be very minor repair. I would say 90% of what our repairs are done dockside or mobile.
Okay.
Since a lot of our customers don't own trailers, so a huge part of our business is dockside service.
That's good to
Very,
know.
very minor repairs will be done there, batteries, oil changes, that kind of
Okay.
stuff. Any kind of bigger repairs will go back to Orlando.
Okay, I was just concerned because of that residential community adjacency, whether there be a noise impact, and
Sure.
You've answered my question for me. Do you plan on any further expansion in this area in the future?
You never know.
Okay.
It's all economic based, I guess.
The location is ideal for what you're looking at doing. I understand your want for that 27. It's high traffic area. You literally are, that's the gateway right into Clermont, so it's a good spot. I think it's a great use of existing infrastructure. And the other concern I had was their parking space reduction to allow that, but in the report, we've got a contingency plan for that, so that if in the future, we can come back and review that. So my concerns basically were about the noise. You've adequately satisfied that. I'm looking forward to you guys going in there, and I'm going to strongly encourage this board to vote for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hoisington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions and concerns have really been addressed. I was worried about the boats being out in front as a showcase. I agree with my colleague with the rental place you pass by there, and it looks like
Thank
every
you.
piece of equipment is sitting out there out front, but you addressed that. My other concern was with the neighborhood, as you said, that's next to it. How is that going to impact the noise, the traffic with that neighborhood? Has that been considered, or is that a concern? But I was also glad to see that even though you're taking up some of the parking space, you still are within what is required, so that's very appreciative. Wish you luck and success, but I'm really concerned about how it's going to impact that neighborhood with the traffic coming in and out.
You know, my experience with boat dealerships is there's not a lot of parking needed, not a lot of foot traffic. It's one here, it's one there, and it's a lot of communication, dockside service. Hey, we want to look at a new boat. I saw it online. Can you bring it out to me? Those are the kind of things. But being in Orlando is not the same as being in Clermont.
Right.
When someone wants to buy it in Clermont, you guys want to buy local, and that's part of my thing. After COVID, the whole buying process of purchasing a boat really changed, and there's more and more people buying online. When I was selling in the early 90s, you shook everybody's hand and you delivered the boat personally. There are a ton of people after COVID that I've never even met, and that my sales guys have just delivered the boat. They've never even had contact with them until they pulled up to their dock. So the buying process is definitely changing.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Tadona.
Good evening, sir. Thank you so much for your experience in boating. I don't own a boat, but my questions are more operational, if you don't mind. So, with this piece of property, where would you say would be the best way that you're either taking a delivery or how to enter into your showroom area? Would it be off of Bloxham and come around the building, or am I coming in off of 27 on that small little road to come into the parking lot? Where would you see the majority of your traffic coming in?
The traffic I would say, would come through the front door, so they would park in the existing parking spots and walk through the front door.
Right, but how am I getting into that parking lot? Off of 27, or am I coming around Grand off of Bloxham? I mean, I realize it's up to me as the person, but...
May depend on where you're coming from.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I guess if you're on this side, you may come in the back way. If you're
Right.
on the other side, coming off 27, then you'll come in that way.
Okay. Inside the fence, we were talking about a couple of boats. The paperwork also talks about water skis and wakeboards. Is there anything like smaller, larger? I don't know anything about boats, so is there going to be rowboats, skidoos, kayaks, anything like that inside that
No
fence?
kayaks. Yeah, it's all, we will have a pro shop inside. A pro shop means wakeboards, water skis, ski ropes, tubes, life jackets, any kind of safety gear
So
that
all
a
that's
boater would
inside.
need.
Okay.
That would be inside.
What do you figure the average size of a boat that's going to go in that fence?
Probably 21 feet.
Okay. The fence, I can get it in by either backing it in and maneuvering it in, or possibly on a dolly. I mean, you can make things as light as anything on a dolly, right?
Yeah, we use a forklift to move them around on a trailer.
Okay. In the conversation, I picked up that 2 or 3 boats might actually be outside the gated area, whether for whatever reason, maybe for repair, for...
Yeah, maybe during the day we unlock it and take 1 or 2 out, but
Okay.
for the most part, everything is going to be behind the fence because that's got to be a secured area.
Okay. In your experience, can you overflow that parking lot where and I'm just asking a question, where you've got a couple of boats inside the fence, some overflow outside the fence, and we're also doing service work. So here I come with my 20-footer, 18-footer, whatever, and now I've got to park in that parking lot.
Yeah, there's a warehouse in the back that extra boats could go inside for
Okay.
service and whatnot.
Right.
Again, the purpose of what we want to do here is a sales center,
Right.
not so much into the repair stuff because we do a lot of dockside repairs.
Dockside repairs.
The repair overflow, any kind of overflow goes back to Orlando.
Okay. Would you say that some of the boats that would be in the fenced area or possibly in that parking lot might be catalog type sales? So I come in, I'm looking for a pontoon boat, you're going to show me what you have, maybe we go inside, you're going to show me a couple of options that I could add for the boat, and then the sale kind of progresses from there, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
The delivery of that boat, is it coming to you or is it going to come to my mooring spot?
We would deliver it to your house.
To my house?
Yep.
Okay, so you don't anticipate, and I hope you the best of luck, 20, 30 boats coming in because they've been sold and they've got to come through you first. They're going to be going somewhere else. There's no
No.
traffic in here.
I hope we deliver 20
I
or
hope
30
you do
boats.
too. Like I said, first thing I said was I respect your
We'll be talking about a different location.
Absolutely, listen. Yes, we will. We mentioned that there not only would be different kinds of sales inside, but service inside, light as they may be. So I'm assuming you've made provisions for your sales floor and whatever is going to be motors and oil and gas and fluids and stuff like that that might be operating or somewhere onto that other side of the building, right? One doesn't
Yeah,
mix with
that's in the
other.
back, but we're going to do very, very minor type service stuff there. We're not going to set up a huge repair shop in there.
Okay. Has anybody ever brought to your attention that Bloxham Avenue is a very, very busy side street all the way from Grand down to 50 where it hooks up with the Winn-Dixie?
Yes.
So that being said, or that being asked, when you start taking deliveries of either equipment or sales and things like that, in your experience, do they come in off of like flatbed trucks, box trucks? You pull up with an F-350 to offload it?
Yeah, all deliveries are accepted into Orlando. This is going to be, I might have 20 Benningtons in Orlando, and I might send 2 to Clermont.
Okay.
So everything gets offloaded in Orlando. My guys that work for me will bring the inventory up here to stock it
Okay. How?
via truck,
Okay.
pickup truck, and then they'll drop it off, and the forklift will put it in the
Okay.
corral.
I guess my concern, piggybacking on my colleague, is we probably would not want to see a string of pickup trucks, flatbeds parked on Bloxham, waiting to be offloaded
No, that
on
won't
the
happen.
opposite side of a residential area, and then we start getting phone calls where people can't get out of their development to get to a doctor's office or something
You're
like that.
talking about one boat here or one boat there, or the initial few boats. There might be a dozen boats that come up there. But those drop off and they leave, and we move it with a forklift.
Okay. Your hours of operation would be?
Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, Saturday, 8 to 4. Closed on Sunday.
Okay. All right, so the best thing we can hope for is that the activity won't spill out too bad beyond the fence and the parking lot, because I believe your parking lot is attached to the equipment rental, correct? Doesn't it, it breezes through the,
There's a cross-access.
right.
Yes.
So, I mean, obviously, you're going to be aware that you've got to maintain some sort of space for their customers and clients to come in and out of. Okay. That's all I have. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner May?
Thank you, and most of those questions were ones that I had as well. So in regards to fencing, because I know that the equipment shop next door has fencing around the entire property. You're only focused on your fencing just where the new and used boats, the square here, and not around the entire property.
Correct.
Okay. Now, the question that Vince had brought up, Commissioner, in regards to the equipment facing the front, is there language that basically says that they're not allowed to have?
That's a staff question.
Is there any language that does not allow front facing?
I'm sorry, that was a staff question. I didn't realize my microphone.
There is,
was off.
under Section 2, Number 2, it says the outdoor display of new and used boats shall be limited to the highlighted area on Exhibit A, which is that box, this box here.
Okay. Yeah, I think it would just be very hard to display on that front part, since that's a kind of a way for people to go into I think that's the only way to get into the other property that you were talking about. So I couldn't see any boats being displayed on the front. It would be disruptive for traffic coming in and out for the rental depot. So on the side driveway, because you have the new and used boats, there's a dumpster next to that on this driveway. I had to put the dumpster in there. What is that going to be used for? Because there is a warehouse entrance. So if you're looking at the north side of the building, is that going to be used as well for your customers, or is that going to be closed off to you all for employee parking, and then for, boats being either repaired or not displayed, but maybe being available for the customer?
On the side, there's a door on the side that we would bring the boats in through that side into the front showroom area.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, and its ability to drive around the building. I mean, it's very narrow there, but it's.
I know, does a boat actually, are you able to get a boat through there? Because
it's
it's pretty
tricky.
narrow. I drove through it and it was like, wow.
It can
So-
happen, but it's tricky.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's where it comes up to what my fellow commissioner next to me had asked about the size of these boats. So you're not going to have anything bigger than 21 feet, or is there something that will be larger?
We do sell boats that are 23 to 24 feet, but 21 to 22 is really the optimum size for the lakes.
So you are going to do sailboats?
Do what?
You just said sailboats.
No,
No, so
no sailboats.
no sailboats.
No,
okay.
no.
Oh, you just said sailboats.
I am not
Sorry,
a
that-
sailboater,
Okay.
no.
So nothing really above the 21 feet. My concern is, again, because of the residential area behind and blocks them. It's only a 2-lane road. I just don't know how wide these boats are, and if it's going to cause some delay in
They're-
traffic, because that is a very well-used.
All the boats on trailers are road legal.
Okay,
They're the same width as a car.
got it. And usually, when do you do deliveries? Is there a specific time during the
It
day?
depends on the customer. If they say they want the boat delivered at 6 a.m., we'll deliver it at 6 a.m. If it's 6 p.m., then we'll do that.
So even though you're open between 8 and 5, you
I
will
mean,
do after hours?
That's part of selling. Yep.
Got it. So signage location, where is your signage location on the, on here? Is that your signage? Where is the signage location going to be? I'm just trying to see it on this map here. Is it in the middle of that?
Yeah.
Is that in the middle? Because right now it's just, it's broken.
Yeah, there's a sign that
Is it-
exists there. It's not very evident right now because a hurricane took it out.
Yeah,
And
I
we
saw
have been-
that.
We've been slow to replace it because we don't know who's going to be in there.
But where is it? Is it in the
It's right-
entrance
it's,
or, can you show me?
It's right, hang on, it's right here.
Right on that median right there. Oh,
See
okay.
that island right there?
Yes,
It's in the island.
got it, okay. Just wanted to know
And then
exactly
the
where it was.
only other signs on are on the building.
And then you answered the question in regards to the trees. So, because there's a lot of trees on the medians as well as there's trees along that north side where the new and used boats are going to be. So those are going to remain, I'm assuming.
Those all stay.
Okay, that's a good, yeah, that's a good buffer there. So, in regards to the back, I believe that is that a stormwater retention pond, or what is that located behind
That's a
the
retention
building?
pond.
That's a retention pond?
Yeah, and it acts as a buffer to the neighbors in the back, and that's all lined with trees in the back also.
So there's
And
no,
there's a hedge back there.
okay, so there's no fence there, there's nothing that someone
There was a
can,
fence there, we've taken it down, because it was damaged again with the trees that fell on it and that sort of thing. But no, there's a hedge and trees
okay,
that buffer the back. There's literally, hardly any interference with the neighbors in the back.
got it, yeah, because it would just look good, because the other property as well has a fence, so it'd be
Right.
nice to kind of even it out. But you answered that question. You already answered the question on the boat repair is very minor. So you're saying, what is minor? What is the definition of minor to you in regards to the repairs of the boats? It's to you, the applicant.
Oh, repairs to the building?
No, repairs to the boats. You said it was very minor repairs at the
Oh,
site, because I know
we're
you're going to be
talking
at the
like
dock.
Battery changes, oil changes, just very simple things. Anything that's more than that will have to go back to Orlando.
Got it.
My
Yeah, 'cause-
intent is to start very small here, and if things grow, then we're going to have to look at a different alternative.
Got it. Okay. And that's all, is that under the requirements of environmental permitting in regards to changing of oils? And it's just a question that I have to you as staff.
Well, yeah. Fire department does look at that, how they house that equipment and the actual used oils, so they'll be reviewing that.
They'll be
For
reviewing.
compliance, yes.
Okay. Yeah, because my concern was on the repair, and the only reason why is that I was reading the ordinance, and under section 125-337A 17, it only says boat, allowed for boat sales, but it doesn't say anything about boat repair. So I just want to make sure that what we're putting forth in regards to, you know, you're saying that we're going to have new and used boat dealership and boat repair, kind of gave us kind of a red flag, because we're kind of thinking, so I don't know if that language should say minor boat repair or somewhere we can,
The repair is incidental to the dealership. I don't think we have any dealerships that don't have some form of repair, whether it be automotive or boats. They're all part of that dealership. That's what this is, a dealership.
right, but
Or
in
boat
the,
sales anyway. It's listed in the code, as you're right.
yeah, it's boat sales, but it
sales,
doesn't say
right.
boat repair. Under section 9, A9, it does say allow for truck and auto repair, but it doesn't say boats. So I just wanted to make sure it's specific to the code, and the code doesn't say boat repair. So
We
if,
put it in the conditional use permit. It says here, boat dealership and repair. boat
okay,
repair.
but I would
I
feel
guess.
comfortable it would say minor repair so that people don't realize that it's
I get it.
major
Okay,
repair.
sure.
You know, we're not going, so, I think you answered in regards to how many boats. In regards to the showcase, how many boats will you be consistently moving boats in and out, different, I mean, do you have like a plan? You have 3 boats 1 week, you know, have 4 boats 2 weeks from now, just kind of different displays?
I mean, based upon the outdoor and the indoor, I think I can put about a dozen units up there
On
at any given time.
the outdoor one?
Yep.
Okay. And again, you'll be using forklifts and pickup truck?
One
And-
forklift, yeah.
One forklift, okay. think that's it for now. And, oh, the question that came up about the lease. How long is your lease with the owner?
Right now, we're looking at 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah, and while I've got the floor here, one thing I wanted to add, you're worried about storage. When you're bringing the boats in, possibly having to sit down on the road, that would never happen here because we've got over 280 feet of storage along the side here, along this side. So if there was ever, and I'm talking about standing, not actual storage. So if there was more than 3 boats there coming in at one time, you'd never be on blocks. And there's enough to do along the side on a temporary.
And if you had the boats along that, you still have access in and out for a car to come in. It's not going to block it. Okay. I think that is it for me. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I think for the applicant, you've heard several of us mention the effects on the neighborhood and the community because that is a residential area behind Bloxham. So obviously, if you've been in business this long in Orlando area, you probably are the type of person that tends to consider your neighbors and working with your neighbors. So obviously, there's an emphasis here as well for that. I appreciate you clarifying the hours of operation. That was a question that I had with respect to sales, but primarily more service. And maybe that's the word we should be using. It sounds like it's more service versus repair. Because I know this commission, not these exact commissioners, but this commission, the Planning and Zoning Commission, heard last year an auto repair, I think, facility off of Highway 50, and we talked a little bit about service hours because of the noise that's affected with that. But it sounds like your service providing, that you're going to be providing is a little bit lower intensity in terms of noise. And I just will point out just for the public and for the commission that we do have, the staff did write into the resolution a condition that if noise creates a nuisance, it can be brought back. And so hopefully if it does present itself as an issue, we can certainly address that. I just want to clarify with regard to display and storage that right now, as I understand this, and I guess maybe the attorney or staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but that only in this highlighted area, this area where it says new and used boats that's highlighted in yellow in our packet, is where that display can take place. And so they can't display a boat elsewhere without being in violation of their conditional use permit. Now, obviously, if they're moving stuff around, you gotta provide, due process for that to allow that to occur. But displaying it for sales or for repairs, that we're going to hopefully limit that to that yellow area and not face some of the same concerns we have some of the other buildings there on 27. And speaking of 27, I appreciate the fact that you guys are looking at kind of reusing a spot on a main arterial that really kind of is an entry point from the north coming into the city of Clermont, and kind of bringing that property back to life. And unfortunately, the school didn't work out, and obviously understand those circumstances with the regulations related to that. But certainly excited to see something so close to our city boat ramp and the chain of lakes, and as an entry point to the community, it really kind of emphasizes and reaffirms that we're a water community, we're a boating community. The one other thing I wanted to bring up was with relation to, for lack of a better word, junkyard. What I don't want to see in a situation here is, even in the storage area, that it becomes a dumping ground for boats that just don't work and collect mildew and moss and rubbish, and at this time of year turn yellow with all the pollen. And so, there's nothing in here right now that prohibits junkyard per se, but certainly I would say that that's not in characteristic with a dealership, with displaying new and used for sale. So I just wanted to make sure I got that out there to let you know that that was something that
You got my
did
word on
concern
that.
mine.
I don't like junk around at all.
Yeah.
We,
Yeah.
we don't get to be number one by having junk laying around.
Absolutely. And then my final question to you is, in the resolution, we don't have hours of operations as a condition. Would you be amenable to your hours of operation being included as a
Absolutely.
condition? Okay,
Yep.
wonderful. Any other questions for the commission?
Yes, I have, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yeah.
Okay, just for the record, your hours of operation was Monday through Friday, 9 to 5?
8 to 5.
8 to 5, I'm sorry. Okay, good. And on Saturdays, 8 to 4?
Yep,
Sundays?
closed.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, and just say, look, I like the idea, I love the idea. I'm really heartbroken about the school couldn't go in, but your second choice right now. At this point, let's say you got people that aren't as educated, you might say, and decide to bring a boat in. Okay, after hours. Will you have signs saying all repair boats have to be to the back of the building? You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to avoid anything being displayed in those parking
Like a
spots right
drop,
there.
like a patron
Like a
drop-off.
drop-off.
Yeah.
Like, example, go to any car service. You just drop your car off, hand the keys, and you leave, or put it in the drop box.
Yeah.
That's what I'm concerned about.
I mean, I haven't ever actually experienced that
Okay.
in my experience at the other dealerships. I mean, I guess anything's possible, but somebody
Mhm.
would be taking a massive risk by dropping their boat off
Oh, I
in
know
a,
that.
in a
Especially in
parking
that
lot
area.
in the middle of the night. That would, if that was to happen, then I would expect one of my employees to meet them at that time
Perfect.
if that was arranged. Otherwise, that stuff doesn't happen.
Okay,
I
so.
mean, our hours of operation are posted, you know, great signage, service,
Mhm.
parts, pro shop. I mean, all that kind of stuff is how we do it.
Okay, so once again, for the record, during your hours of operation, there'll be no boats displayed in the front.
Correct.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion, and perhaps if the person making that motion would be willing to include the hours of operation, if so amenable.
I'd like to make a motion for resolution number 2025-008R with the addition of the hours of operation, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and on Saturdays, 8 to 4. Sundays are closed. That's my motion.
Can I add another to the motion if it's allowed?
Well,
Discussion.
It's a discussion.
so we need a second for the motion.
That's,
Is there a-
Second.
Okay, so moved by Commissioner Nemec, seconded by Commissioner Hoisington, and then let's discuss the motion. Commissioner May?
So my concern again was the wording in regards to boat repair. I agree with you in saying boat services. I just don't want, since they're doing minor or actually very minor, and they're doing a lot of the repairs off-site. I mean, is it better to say use boat dealerships and boat service? The repair for me it just means that they're actually going to be working on oil changes and changing, major repairs.
Yeah, I'm looking at the actual resolution where it states language of repair, and I think, and Mr. Henschel, correct me if I'm wrong, Section 2, land use, number one. Number one, and that first sentence, conditional use permit shall grant approval to allow for new and used boat dealership and boat repair. What I'm hearing you say, if I can paraphrase, is boat minor repair and/or servicing? Is that what you're recommending as a?
Yeah, I mean, we can say minor repair. I don't know, as an attorney, our city attorney, does that really matter? Is that the same kind of repair and service,
Yeah.
is the same thing, or should we just say minor?
It does not matter.
Okay.
But that's not to say you can't move or ask to amend the motion, but based on what I've heard, I don't think it makes a difference as to the legality of what they're allowed to do there.
Then I'm okay.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Say nay. And chair votes aye, motion carries 7-0. Good luck.
Good luck.
Thank you.
All right. We will move on to the next item on the agenda. That finishes our new business. We're going to move to board training. This is going to be an opportunity for our city attorney, Mr. Waugh, to provide some information to the Planning and Zoning Commission and the citizens tuning in on our roles and responsibilities as commissioners.
Yeah. Have I gotten the camera close-ups yet? I really hope so.
If I may, before you begin, Councilman, could you just check the audio, the video feed, because it seems like it's only picking up Miss Commissioner May. It's not picking up Commissioner Sedona. On the video, not audio.
Oh, it's stopping at the end.
Yeah, in other words, it's not panning out to him. I'm sorry, Mr. Commissioner Covey. Unless you want to switch seats, because I know you want to be in Cahigno. Okay, thank you.
All right. Mr. Waugh.
Okay, so as y'all may know, I was asked to prepare some training for you, and I think that's a good idea. I don't know if this is done annually for your board or not, but even if it's not, some of you come with different backgrounds, different...
And may I just, do we have handouts?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah. And so it's usually a good idea, best practice, to kind of go over some basics. Now, what you're going to see in your handout and in the presentation is, well, it's two things. I mean, one, it's a lot of stuff that I teach at UF Law, but it's also stuff that I've taken from other trainings. It may or may not address your questions, so if you think of something, please feel free to interrupt me and I'll do my best to answer it. So I've got an overview slide here. We're going to talk about some of the basics about planning, but what I really want to cover, the stuff that I think is non-negotiable in what we talk about with training, is the laws that you have to apply, like the things that you will and must apply here, and the standards that you have to follow as board members. I'm talking sunshine law, I'm talking public records law, I'm talking ex parte communications. A lot of people think, well, what are the chances that, issue X is going to come up? Maybe not so good, but it will happen. I've seen everything. I mean, it will happen. So it's important to kind of talk about some of these things. Just as rough background, you as a planning and zoning board exist primarily for one reason, and that's that back in the early 70s, the legislature passed the Comprehensive Planning Act. Originally, planning boards were developed in the 70s. They're required by state statute, like the city council cannot, and the citizens by referendum cannot abolish this board, even if they wanted to. So in any event, this is something that's required. Now, the statutes lay out the very minimum of what these boards can do. So for example, different planning boards in different places do different things. A minimum thing is y'all deal with amendments to the comprehensive plans. Like that's something that's absolutely required. So we are going to spend some time talking about that tonight. It's not what you deal with every meeting because they're supposed to be rare, and we'll talk about why that is too. But generally speaking, comprehensive plans were developed in the 70s because there were concerns about corruption. So if someone could buy off the local, council members, they could obtain changes to zoning or changes to other entitlements very quickly, and they weren't really bound by anything. Even if it's in the middle of a neighborhood, they could just go, bam, change it to industrial perhaps. So there were a lot of concerns about how local governments were dealing with these kinds of things, and that's why we have comprehensive plans. It's to hold people to a standard, and that if it's going to change, it's got to have some real basis in the public. So your job through public input and using your common sense is to identify the needs of the residents, what are the best interests, and to help formulate that blueprint, which then, of course, will go to the city council. They're continuously updated, and I don't know when your next one will come up, but it'll come. So I just wanted to give you an excerpt on part 2 on this slide of what your comp plan looks like if you haven't actually looked. Your comprehensive plan is about 130 pages, plus or minus. It's comprehensive, but it's very detailed. You know, it's single space. That chapter 1 excerpt that I've given you, that's the first excerpt I could find, and it proceeds from the general to the specific. So you'll see in the goal 1, it talks about ensure that the character, magnitude, and location of all land uses provide a system for orderly growth, balanced natural, physical, economic environment. Now that could mean a lot of things. You could read that a lot of different ways, and you could come up with a lot of different planning based on those words, and that's why we drill down. Okay, objective 1.1. In fulfillment of goal 1, we have objective 1.1, discourage urban sprawl. The city shall discourage and or reduce urban sprawl. And then we get even more specific. How do we do that? Policies 1.1.1 through 1.1.3. Now, when you go to amend a comp plan, you'll think, are there other ways we could be doing this? Discourage urban sprawl. You probably have some ideas. If so, talk about it. Hear from the public. Amend the comp plan. In any event, you have sections. I think actually your public school facilities portion was removed.
Yes.
But it's still listed on the website. In any event, most of these are required by Florida statute to be in your comprehensive plan. You do have some ones that are not required, and I think that's due to the unique place that we're in here in Clermont. Go ahead.
Sorry, Counselor.
Yeah.
If I may stop you, according to our packet, you have an overview.
Uh-huh.
All right, and in section 3, I would like you, are you going to get during your presentations, will you be talking about the Roberts rules and the quasi matters?
Everything you see on that overview is in the packet.
Okay,
and
no problem. I didn't mean to
And I
interrupt
promise
you.
I'll get
You
there.
just bypassed
Yeah.
the page. I just wanted to make sure you weren't bypassing.
Everything in the overview
Okay,
is
I'm
in the
sorry to
packet,
interrupt
and
you. Go
I
ahead.
will address during this presentation.
Okay.
So on slide 3, I think this is actually a really important overview of how planning works for you. I use this in my class as well. I think the way to think about land use in general is that your comprehensive plan is your biggest overarching 30,000-foot view of what's going on in your local government. And then that, in turn, dictates your zoning, because you can't amend the zoning on a piece of property that is in conflict with your comprehensive plan. That, in turn, affects what kind of subdivisions and plats that you allow. That, in turn, affects the variances. That, in turn, affects CUPs, and so on all the way up to building permits. So you go from the general to the specific. And zoning itself is, so that on that pyramid, it's the step above comp plan, also has some interesting backgrounds. Now, zoning law began hundreds of years ago. We could look at history, the Greeks, the Romans, Ottomans, whatever. I found an interesting example in colonial New England when the public reacted really badly to a gunpowder mill going into the middle of a neighborhood. We're still dealing with the same issues today, aren't we? In 1926, though, the big issue was the Supreme Court came out with its Euclid decision. And what Euclid did is it empowered local governments from a constitutional perspective to use their police power to create different zonings for different areas. Now, that year is actually very important. Why is it that zoning was so big in Miami and Ocala in the 1920s? Where they wanted to develop these different zoning areas. We're now beginning to unravel a little bit of this, but I'll keep going. So SCOTUS said that as long as there is a rational basis and you're doing something on behalf of the health, safety, and welfare of the residents, you can use that police power to develop different zonings. Now, in 2005, you may remember the Kello v. New London case. That upheld taking, there was kind of a structure that was a little bit of blight, and a city condemned it so that they could help put a hotel there. And that was kind of a revolution, because the idea that you could use a city's police power to take something that was blight and give it to a developer, like a hotel developer, that's a a dramatic use of police power. It vests a lot of discretion. I only mention that to say it's very powerful. Now, the Supreme Court, as we speak, is going to revisit this case this week or next week, so I don't know what they'll do. But if anything, in Florida, your police powers are even stronger. So whether we like it or not, we have some detailed statutes for P&Z boards. Florida Statute 163.3174 talks about how you have to have a local planning agency. Now, you could have a non-voting school board member. I've never seen one. I presume someone's been appointed, but I don't know. Yeah. There's military-based representatives who are allowed to attend and be non-voting. But in any event, generally there's a responsibility for planning. I'm sharing with you some excerpts from the Clermont Charter that actually talk about planning and zoning. And there was something in the charter that has basically been replaced by changes that have occurred in Clermont. But there's still a little itty-bitty excerpt, and that is, you can see section 59, section 62. The city shall appoint a planning and zoning commission. Well, thanks a lot. Your code goes into a little more detail. And so in the code, which I have on slide 3 of this section, this is in your land development code, talks about the reason for it and talks a little bit about what you have to do. Says that you've got to deal with consistency with the comprehensive plan. You're going to have regular meetings. And as brought up by the vice chair, section 101-69, Robert's Rules. So this actually isn't optional. It's not one of those things that you can decide just among yourselves, which is most common with boards. Like you don't have to use Robert's Rules. You could use other rules if you wanted. This is in your code. You have to use Robert's Rules. And it says 11th edition. I've got a copy of the 11th and the 12th in the office. There's really not a lot of difference, and we'll get into that. So your code talks about conditional use permits. I'm not going to read this whole thing. I think that y'all all get it, but I do want to talk a little bit about 101-212. Actually, let's start with 101-209. A conditional use, also known as a special exception use, means those uses or combinations of uses which, because of their uniqueness and character, are not specifically identified as permitted. Now, the reason why I just want to draw your attention to that is a lot of times cities and counties have permitted uses where, yeah, you don't really need a lot of approvals to do something that's already permitted on the property. And then they have a chart of conditional uses where if you meet certain criteria, you'll be granted the condition. And then everything else is forbidden. What this section kind of says to me is, based on your discretion and your review of the circumstances and everything, almost anything might go based on a conditional use. Now, it's still subject to various zoning comp plan issues, but it's very permissive, gives you a lot of discretion. Then we go to 101-212. Let's see, I want to look at subsection C, the general criteria for granting a permit. Upon review and formal action on an application for a conditional use permit, the commission may recommend granting, and the city council may grant by resolution, a CUP, if it is found that, and then 4 things. The granting of a CUP will not adversely affect the comp plan. The use will not be detrimental to the health, safety, or general welfare. The proposed use will comply with the regs and conditions, and the proposed use may be considered desirable at the particular location. I'm pointing this out to you because you have a burden as a P&Z board. You have discretion, but your burden is that in support of your decisions, when you're granting something, you have to make sure, and there have to be sufficient findings of those 4 things. That has to be a part of the process. And it always is, really, in part because your staff does a great job in its staff report of giving you the facts and the findings. So when you adopt something by motion, you're usually wrapping up what staff has presented to you, and it says that it's consistent with the comp plan. It says that it's in the health, safety, welfare of the public. But every now and then, we get an issue, and I've encountered one even since I've been here, where someone felt that based on the evidence, that was not the case. So, for example, we dealt with, and I don't remember the name of it, but we had what I call a fluedra mediation on it. And what was the location of that? Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it was with Jimmy Crawford and the storage and the daycare. What's it called?
That's on Hooks.
So you're familiar with that, and that mediation was like one of the first things I did as your interim city attorney. City council shot down our settlement agreement, okay? Now, the applicant has raised the possibility that, look, at the hearing in front of the board and in front of the city council, I only gave you evidence that showed that it was good. Like, where was the alternative evidence? Where were the people who were saying, where was the evidence that it's not in the, consistent with or undesirable? Now, of course, in fact, there was testimony to that. So that's my response. In fact, a lot of people did have safety concerns and things like that. But if you have I'll get to, if you have a hearing and all you have is evidence on one side, that's tough. Even if you have your personal preferences, you are bound, and we'll talk about this a little more in a quasi-judicial hearing, you're bound by the evidence. We don't just make it up. Did you have a question about that?
Yes, I do. It's on the section number 4. The proposed use may be considered desirable at the particular location. Is that similar to aesthetic view?
Is that similar to what?
Aesthetic view.
Aesthetic.
Yes. So, for example, if you're trying to put in surrounded by single-family homes, and you decide to put in like a 55-foot building that is like completely
It's not
way out of
consistent with the
proportion.
aesthetics.
Exactly, and it doesn't coincide with the comprehension plan. That would be one consideration of rejection.
I think that's potentially a fair factor
Okay,
to
good.
consider.
That was my
I can't
question.
rule that out, yeah.
All right, so aesthetic view can be used on that.
But it even goes further in subsection D, and it talks about, here's some things that you definitely can consider. Density, compatibility, which I think goes towards what you're saying, size, height shall be considered. Transportation, utilities, stormwater management, site planning, solid waste disposal. We get a lot of questions about dumpsters here. And actually, that's a part of something you should consider according to your code. Oops.
Christian, are
Yeah.
we able to get this sent electronically to our emails?
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd appreciate that.
Well, I barely can either. So, at any rate, the next one of the big things is ethics. And this is true for every board member, local, city council, whatever. If we ever get a, historic preservation board, they're going to be subject to it. They're codified in Part 3 of Chapter 112 Florida statutes. There's a bunch of them. I'm going to give you some of the important ones. But they outline the standards for ethical conduct and disclosures. Even the city attorneys are subject to that, with good reason. We have influence on how contracts are done. We have to disclose things. I'll tell you a quick example. In the city of Ocala, they had long-time, excellent city attorneys. I know because I worked with them, but they were there for probably 30 years. And what they were doing, Ocala, like Clermont, has grown substantially over time and has had its ups and downs in terms of development. But the law firm, on one side of the law firm, they were representing developers, and then when those developers came in front of the city board, they weren't representing them for the board stuff, but they were still representing them on everything else, and they weren't disclosing that to the public and the board. Now, the Florida Bar looked at that and found that's not technically unethical, but it's definitely not a best practice. They're no longer the city attorneys for Ocala because of that. So my only point is use your common sense, right? Even if something's not technically unethical, if you get a sense, if it, where there's smoke, there's fire, use common sense. But examples of prohibited conduct are solicitation and acceptance of gifts. You can't imply that you will recommend something in exchange for tickets to the skybox of a Magic game. Unauthorized compensation. The big one here is misuse of public position. Because misuse of a public position can encompass, it's almost like the drainage for everything else. It's all the things we can't think of, but that would be a misuse. When I'm talking to you about common sense, don't do something that's not in the public interest. Shouldn't be taking advantage of things that the public doesn't have an opportunity to take advantage of, that kind of thing. Honoraria, solicitation or acceptance of honoraria. There's limits, but for example, if someone wanted to honor your service, you can do it up to a certain financial amount. You can take something up to X, $100 or so. But if it's beyond that, or it might even be $25, I'll look up the exact dollar amount, but don't do it. And you know what the best practice, what every city attorney tells? Don't take anything. I mean, it's tough. Doing business with one's own agency, bad. Voting conflicts of interest. Let me see if I cover this. Okay. I cover this in a little more detail, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. Misuse of public position. No public officer shall corruptly use or attempt to use his or her official position or any property or resource or perform his or her official duties to secure a special privilege, benefit, or exemption for himself, herself, and others. Let me give you an example of something that does qualify as that and something that you might think does but does not. So a lot of times members of a city council or county commission are asked to vote on things that will make their lives better, but are not what we call special privileges or benefits or exemptions. That might be voting for a road that will help them get somewhere, but will also help everyone else in Lake County get somewhere. Or I think you get the example. Or repealing a business tax receipt, okay? For concrete examples, that might benefit people on the city council, or I don't think that came before you. But unless it's a special privilege benefit, it's not unethical. Now, an example of something that would be a special privilege benefit or exemption is voting to approve a contract that goes to your spouse. A $100,000 contract, and even if it went through the bidding process the right way, you shouldn't vote on it. Everyone else can, but you can't. And then we got the anti-nepotism law, but whatever, okay? So that's an example of something that would be a special privilege. Voting conflicts. No county, municipal, or other local public officer shall vote in an official capacity upon any measure which would inure to his or her special private gain or loss. So that's the same principle. We don't want to allow that. But I do want to tell you that unless you have an actual conflict under that statute, you're required to vote. You have to vote. You cannot abstain. So it's happened to me over the years many times where city council members have come up to me and said, I just don't think it'd be a good look for one reason or another. Maybe they know somebody involved with the organization, maybe they volunteered with them, whatever it is. You have to vote. I don't care what the look is. You're required you were elected by the people. Unless you have an actual conflict, you have to vote. Now, you weren't elected, but you have been appointed. You got to vote. And when you do have a conflict, we have to fill out a certain form and turn it into Tallahassee. And we have, I presume that we have those forms available. It hasn't happened here yet since I've been here, but it's a quick form. It has to be submitted within a certain number of days, and it just has to be reported. That's all. It's not, it could be bad if you didn't submit it, but I've never seen someone not do it.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yeah.
may, on that question. All right, the voting conflicts. All right, I would like you to clarify this for me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's say a commissioner, a councilor, not a commissioner up here, because we get elected through the council. But let's say a developer donates $1,000 to a councilman for their reelection. Is this considered that in voting conflicts?
No, and
Could you explain why?
well, I'll tell you, there's a practical reason and an academic reason, okay? The academic reason is, well, the practical one's easier. no one would be able to donate anything if that was the way it was. I'm just telling you. So the way it is that people make donations all the time. Lots of people in your community will make donations to council members and so on. It doesn't disqualify them. They're open to donations from anybody in the public, and it's just not a conflict under the rules. There's many ethics opinions on that. But think about it. Think about it. What if I was able to disqualify you from voting based on a strategic donation? I could actually disqualify people who I don't want voting on my thing with a strategic donation. So we cannot have a system that allows that. So the way that the system is, whether right or wrong, it's that you can make donations and no one need to disqualify themselves, if that makes sense. Hey, talk to your legislators and have them amend the rule.
That's the law, so
It's
you're
the
quoting
way,
the law.
There's no other, in my opinion, I don't know any other way to continue to allow public funding of campaigns without that.
I
being
know,
the
that's
case.
why Lady Justice is wearing a blindfold.
All right. And then on the next one, I talk a little bit more about what the law says about comp plans. There are some things that are mandatory. I don't think we need to dwell. There are some optional elements that are actually put into statute, but they're just an example. They're not, it's not by way of limitation. You could have a public school facilities element. You could have an airport master plan. You could have a hazard mitigation section. You could have a historic preservation section. Once those are in your comp plan, it's then incumbent upon the local government to create the meaningful guidelines in the land development code to explain that. Your land development code should, at a minimum, deal with the things that I've listed here, which it does. I mean, your land development code is pretty comprehensive. Any questions about that?
No.
Okay. Different kinds of comp plan amendments. You have small scale, which are 50 acres or less. That was amended back in 2021. It used to be, 10 acres? Yeah.
10.
So in 2021, they increased it to 50. P&Z has to hold at least one hearing on it, city council. It's just fewer requirements. It's a smaller hurdle to do a small scale amendment. And then there's other ways that you can amend a comprehensive plan. You can use what's called the expedited review process, which is what's used for most other changes. And those are the big ones. Those are the ones where you're going to start seeing land use attorneys come in front of you and make arguments and presentations. So what is compatibility? We've talked about it in the context of your comprehensive plan, rezoning, conditional use permits. Unfortunately, it's not specifically defined. It can be. Some places do define it. There's some help in the Florida statutes that can help guide you. Take 163.3164 sub 9, for example. It says a condition in which land uses or conditions can coexist in relative proximity to each other in a stable fashion over time, such that no use or condition is unduly negatively impacted. Okay, I mean, that seems to make sense. But it's important to note that compatibility does not mean the same as. So compatibility, it's not, you're not limited to that box to say that something isn't compatible if it doesn't look the same. It still might be compatible. And in order to think about that, factors that you could consider are density, lot size, traffic, size, as the vice chair said, visual characteristics, noise. You've talked about noise tonight. I mean, honestly, I don't normally hear that at a lot of P&Z board meetings, so kudos to you. But incompatible uses might be mitigated and allowed by buffers, transitional uses. So it's not just, it's two sides of a coin. One side of the coin is thinking about compatibility. How might these things be alike? And if they're not, you might need to consider how could they become more alike through conditions? Are you going to put a buffer? Are you going to suggest a separation? That kind of thing. It's just the art of the deal, okay? Now, I would like to talk a little bit about Robert's Rules and basic board conduct. I try to start with the law when I can, and here it is, 101-69. What Robert's rules will tell you is the chair generally has discretion on management in small meetings. So, you rely on your chair to keep the meetings moving. You rely on your chair to keep them orderly. You rely on your chair to enforce order with people in the crowd. We had a city council meeting where the mayor had to do that recently, okay? And that will happen. It can be overridden by motion. So, for example, maybe you don't like a decision that the chair has made. You could move to override that decision. Now, that's a big thing. You don't often see that, but that's in Robert's rules. Now, what Robert's rules will also tell you about discussion is it doesn't normally start and shouldn't be allowed until a motion is made. So you get an item up here, whether it's an ordinance or comp plan amendment, what Robert's rules technically says is no discussion until you get a motion. Someone needs to move, second, then discussion. But that seems like a hardship if you only have a few people on a board. If you have 5 people, even 7 is considered small by Robert's Rules standards, because these rules are meant to apply for gatherings of many, many, many more people, hundreds even. So what Robert's Rules actually says is, look, this formality doesn't need to be followed in small boards, and it usually isn't. Now, you can choose to, but it doesn't need to always be followed. And what it tells you about that requirement in the rules is that...
Christian,
yeah.
can I stop for a second? So explain that
Yeah.
to me a little bit better. If we normally, we're obviously small, and Brian starts off with, we start the discussion. But
Correct.
technically, just how should it go? Should like one of us or the chair, who if we were following the rules, just for my own edification.
Under the rules, I have no problem with how you run things.
Right.
And the reason is that you're a small board, so the rules are necessarily relaxed a little bit.
But what if Brian gets real uptight? He's the chairman and he's relaxed, but what if he wants to follow those rules? What I'm saying is, so what does he
Override him.
initiate?
Override
But
him,
what I'm saying
you
is,
know.
So in the big boards,
Mm-hmm.
how does that go? Does one of us start to say, Chair, we have a motion before us, resolution 2025 dash blah blah blah, and then the discussion starts?
Move to approve, second,
But then discussion would
now
start?
discussion. Is there any discussion? And y'all actually do pretty much follow that,
Okay.
except that you usually have some discussion before you get to the motions.
Okay.
What it says in Robert's Rules about that requirement is it's designed to keep meetings moving. And you can see where it would. I mean, if you, before allowing y'all to speak on anything, you actually required a motion, it probably would accelerate things. But if you have discussion, you're still going to go one by one and allow everyone to say their piece. So I actually don't think it, you're not violating Robert's Rules with anything you do here. So let's see, main motion. So an example, there's different kinds of motions in Robert's Rules. One is you could move to approve, with or without conditions. You could move to deny. Those are examples, typical examples of main motions. Now, while there's a motion pending, move to approve, second, and during the discussion. Someone could make what's called a subsidiary motion. Someone could move to limit the debate. I move to end, WA's discussion at 8 o'clock. You wish, right? No, I'm kidding. But if there's a motion and a second on that, you could do that for the main motion if there was something pending. In fact, the city council, I think, has just adopted something like that in a resolution. But they didn't follow it at the last meeting. So, so at any rate, that's an example of, and so I can give you the book. There's a whole list of subsidiary motions you can make. You can move to table something, right? Now, there's privileged motions. You can move to adjourn and to recess. What is a privileged motion? A privileged motion is something that has to be taken up immediately. It's usually not something that has discussion either. It's something that you move second, and, well, heck, if you guys want to get out of here, you can go. It's a privileged motion. Then there's points of information, points of order, and I do want to talk a little bit about that. So if you look at Robert's Rules, when it talks about point of information, that's your opportunity, no matter what is happening. You can say point of information and try to get some information, okay? Or inform. That is something that can be made at any time. You can interrupt someone to do it. You could also do a point of order. Now, you are starting to hear points of order at city council meetings. A point of order is supposed to be used to enforce rules or to bring something back to the order, okay? But when someone has stepped out of maybe a lane or something like that, you can use a point of order to get it back on track. What I suggest is that if you ever use a point of order, say something with it. What is the issue? Don't just say point of order. Say what it is, because otherwise it's hard to deal with. What do you mean, point of order? Okay. Any questions about this? This is where things get really into the nitty-gritty. Sorry.
Yeah, so, oops, sorry.
Commissioner May.
Sorry about that. I just
No,
jumped
please.
in? Okay. On the privilege motion, to adjourn or to recess, it doesn't have to be the chair. It can be anyone.
Correct.
That's just my question.
And there's reasons for that. I mean, who knows, there might be a circumstance where you do need a recess, or you all know it and maybe the chair doesn't, something like that.
Oh, could you go? You say the same thing.
Yeah, if it pleases the commission, I would prefer to operate how we have been operating with calling the item, allowing staff and the applicant to present, and then each of us, and then opening it up for public comment, and then bringing it back to the commission and going one by one, bringing a motion forward, similar to what we had tonight. Tonight was a great example. It wasn't planned, but Commissioner May had a question about potentially adding an amendment to the motion, and so we dealt with the motion first to get the second to move that forward and then address that issue. And so if it's okay with the commission, I would prefer to continue operating that way rather than precisely as Robert's rules, because I do think as a small commission it makes sense to do that. Plus it allows for staff and the applicant to be there for the whole time when we're asking questions and discussing, and it defines kind of what happens when, rather than kind of operating differently on each item, potentially, depending upon how many motions get made. And then two, I will, I just, as chair, if someone does ask for a point of information or a point of order, please note that I will ask you what your point of order or point of information is. Along those same lines, I think it's important to note. And point of order, I think, would be using tonight as an example. If I would have called on Commissioner May to amend the motion before the motion was even seconded, well, we don't really technically have a motion on the floor. Someone could have said point of order. Right. There's not even a real motion. So example. I think, those are ways that we can utilize those things, but hopefully we're creating an atmosphere here where not only does staff and the applicant and citizens feel like they have opportunities to be heard, but each commissioner as well has opportunities to be heard. And if you ever feel otherwise, I hope that you will express that.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I got to tell you, I've been on this commission for going on 5 years, and I got to tell you, I'm very impressed with this set of commissioners, and especially how you're running the meetings. So I do agree with what you're saying. To the counselor, when somebody calls a point of order, and they do state a reason, do we stop that individual from keep going on?
Well,
and do you step in when a point of order is called?
Well, I don't think so. It's the chair's responsibility. And so what happens?
What happens if it is the chairman?
I'm sorry?
What happens if it's the chairman that's getting point of order called on him or her?
Well, they have a responsibility to run the meetings. They have a responsibility to follow rules. And if you don't think that they're following the rules for some reason, then you can make a motion to remove the gavel as well. I mean, that's a dramatic, all I can tell you is it's the chair's responsibility to do that.
Okay, and to follow up, only a council or commissioner can call a point of order, nobody from the audience?
No, they're not on the board.
Okay,
Yeah.
so.
These are your meetings,
Right, no, that's why I want to know, because There have been several times that I've witnessed people from the audience yell out point of order.
Well, they can say
which is disrupting.
pretty much what they want, I guess. But
Okay.
that's an issue for the chair, I think, as well. What I would say to the chair's point is I actually agree. I'm usually a stickler for motion second discussion. I'm not on a board like this. The reason is a lot of what comes in front of you are very fact heavy and discussion heavy, like they're planning things. A lot of what comes in front of I might differ on what I think about the city council, because a lot of what comes in front of the city council is not that. It's contracts. It's, the business that I think lends itself a lot easier to a motion second discussion. But, all right. So here's an academic thing. Let's quasi-legislative matters. So sometimes what you do, your task is legislative in nature. And an example of that would be adopting and amending the comp plan, adopting and amending the land development code. Why is that legislative? Well, because you're setting policy. You are determining the conditions on which things will be done in the future. So in Florida, what we say is that is a quasi-legislative task. You weren't elected per se, but you are engaging in quasi-legislative matters. And when you have something like that, you have to have a public hearing. Now, evidence may be presented, but need not be presented. And in coming to your conclusions, it's very deferential. You are vested with a lot of discretion to determine what the policy should be. You don't need to rely on what a traffic planner comes in and tells you. You don't need to rely on what I tell you. That's where they pay you the big bucks. I thought the Membrano v. City of Hialeah case was really interesting because what it did is it found that decisions regarding a quasi-legislative decision could be completely unsupported by the data. They could even be contradicted by the data. But if you have a rational basis and a reason for what you do, you can do it. By contrast, some things that you will be doing are judicial in nature. You will be applying the law, which could be rules, the code, the comp plan, to the facts. An example of that is when someone seeks an amendment to zoning or someone seeks a conditional use permit. Then it is quite important that we provide adequate notice consistent with due process. What does that mean? Well, if someone's seeking a conditional use permit, we have to give notice to all the people who might be affected by that. Typically, certainly, it's surrounding landowners. If we knew of someone else for sure who'd be affected, we'd have to give them notice. And if we don't give that notice, we're in trouble. Okay? We have to have a public hearing whereby the applicant is entitled to not necessarily unlimited time, but you can't limit an applicant to 3 minutes. And intervening parties may be entitled to more than 3 minutes. What do I mean by that? So back in, I think, November, the first city council meeting after the election, the city council passed the PUD for the ALF over by the church, okay? We got an appeal on that. And one of the grounds that they argued, well, it was 9 people, 9 appellants, so to speak, petitioners, and one of their arguments was that there wasn't enough room. There wasn't enough room for the hearing, and people left and things like that. But it was 9 people, and only one of those 9 people actually spoke at the hearing. So automatically, 8 out of those 9 people, they're done. They don't even have standing to challenge what the board did. And the one who did speak didn't articulate a reason why they should have standing. The reason I'm bringing this up is there may be times when someone gets up here and is an affected person and could have the right as an intervening party, not just as some member of the public, but to quote-unquote intervene as a party due to how they've been affected. And if that situation happens, and I don't know the way that y'all have done it in the past, they have to be given more time to speak. They have to be given the ability to cross-examine applicants, witnesses, that kind of thing. And I don't know if that's happened here, but that's what the law says. Now, absent that, you limit the public to whatever time that they have, that kind of thing. Now, just among the parties themselves, if like maybe staff doesn't recommend approval of something, and it still comes in front of you, or it still comes in front of the city council. I, as city council, might cross-examine the applicant to establish findings that could support a denial for you. They may have an attorney cross-examine Mr. Henschel, okay? Go after, maybe doesn't like the staff recommendation. And so that can get contentious and long, and normally what I recommend is the adoption of rules and procedures for how that kind of a hearing should work. I don't know if you have them here yet. I don't know. But I'll talk and figure out. The reason why is that can be very contentious. You want to make sure that there's an order, Any questions so far? Now, in a quasi-judicial hearing, too, the evidence has to be preserved. So when people come up with a phone and they want to show you a video, we've got to confiscate the phone if they want that to be evidence in the hearing. If it's on a laptop and it's not on a USB or whatever. So that's the way evidence works in these hearings, too, and a lot of times people aren't aware of that beforehand. So what is the standard of review for these decisions? Now, there's never going to be an appeal from you, well, there shouldn't be, for what's called a petition for writ of certiorari, but that's what happens when they appeal the decisions from the city council. It's the petition. There is a recent opinion from a Tampa judge that says, no, that's not how you do it. She's just been elevated by the governor to the appellate court, so maybe that's an indicator that that's going to change. I don't know. But in that situation, the question is, have we provided due process? Have the essential requirements of law been observed? And is the decision supported by evidence? Those are the key things we have to make sure we do in our hearings. We have to make sure there's due process. We have to follow our own laws, and you would be shocked how many local governments just decide to not follow their own laws. And I don't mean the little things, like maybe we disagree about what mixed use means, for example. Reasonable minds could differ about that. But if there's a requirement in your code that says, when code goes out and sees the code officer has to see the violation, cannot rely on a neighbor just seeing it. If the code says that it has to be personally observed, it has to be personally observed. And you're not following the essential requirements of law if you find that a code violation occurred without personal observation. And that's kind of important because otherwise neighbors can just gang up in that example, right? So that's an example of that. And then competent substantial evidence. There are going to be times where you on this board are confronted with a factual situation that you do not like, but the evidence is only one way. What I as a lawyer say is, if it's only one way and all the evidence is just one way, that's the evidence. You have to make your decision and findings based on the evidence. However, what is competent substantial evidence? And I'll get to that. Let's talk about these cases first. First, Board of County Commissioners of Brevard versus Snyder. Let's see. Oh, so if an applicant is denied, then they have the burden to show that they complied with everything, they're consistent with the comp plan. It's not our burden to defend the denial, okay? And then Renard talks a little bit, another Supreme Court case where what is the standard? What does give someone standing to challenge a decision? And the answer is it has to be more than just something that accrues to the public. Someone complaining that a development increases traffic will not be sufficient to give them standing to appeal, not successfully anyways. But a neighbor who says that their property values will go down as a result, or that they will lack access as a result of the development, that is sufficient to give someone standing to appeal a decision. Why did I say this? Important cautionary notes regarding process. Oh, a lot of people are surprised. So Jennings is an important case. You have in practice, we don't usually prevent people from speaking. We don't usually stop people when something becomes repetitious. But something that is surprising to some people is that hearsay is allowed. You are allowed to consider hearsay as evidence for your findings. You just can't only use hearsay. So people can present hearsay, and then that goes to the weight. It's like you have to have actual direct evidence, but then maybe hearsay bolsters it and strengthens it. And it's really, really important that a decision not have been made prior to the hearing. You all are of this community. You may already very well have opinions about the nature of the development or even this specific one. You are not allowed to have made a decision prior to that zoning hearing. Why? Because you have to rely on the evidence. Your hands are tied by what happens in the hearing. That's what competent substantial evidence means. It also means, for example, maybe you read a study. Maybe you read your own study, and it's not Clermont, but it's on the effects of certain kinds of storage units in Kendall area of Miami, for example. Well, I'm familiar with it. I guess you're familiar with it. That's not admissible in this, unless an expert or a witness brings it, then you can't consider it. It's not evidence. Now, what is this competent substantial evidence? It's evidence that a reasonable mind would accept as adequate to support a conclusion. Now, it's very important. It could be that you receive 20 pieces of evidence on one side and 2 pieces of evidence on the other. And your decision, you go with the 2 pieces of evidence. That is competent substantial evidence. You are allowed to do that. Now, that might sound crazy, but that's why it's called quasi-judicial. You need something to hang your hat on. It doesn't need to necessarily be the best thing to hang your hat on. And the courts are not entitled to review your discretion on that, but you have to rely on something. And that's what competent substantial evidence means. But I gave an example. If you want to find that traffic will harm a neighborhood, you have to base it on evidence such as a traffic study, a witness who testifies to you about traffic, presentation of facts that would allow a reasonable person to infer this.
Question.
Go ahead.
Describe witness, competent witness.
Someone who knows, not someone from Mars, not someone who lives in Modesto, California, and has never been to Clermont, has never been by the neighborhood.
Somebody from the neighborhood or community.
I mean, that person would be competent. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Now, and that leads me into this ex parte communication thing. This is also, I think, a really underappreciated part of what governs you. So, what is an ex parte communication? It's when a party to an application or someone involved with a party, one way or the other, talks or writes to or otherwise communicates directly with you as a board member about something that is pending without it being at a meeting, without it being out in the open or with the public. Now, that is an ex parte communication because the other side doesn't have the right to be there. They don't know what you're saying. Okay? There are lots of examples of this. I gave you a video of, it's really disturbing, but you know what it is? It's a video of something that happens a lot more often than we'd probably like to believe, of a judge who called up a prosecutor and didn't like the way the prosecutor handled a case. The judge wanted the prosecutor to be harder on the defendant, wanted them to defend the police better and all that. And this is all on camera, by the way. Judges aren't allowed to do that. It's on an actual case that the judge had. That destroys the impartiality that the judge is supposed to have. There's a big case out of Atlanta recently with Young Thug, a trial that went for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. The judge had a conversation with one of, I mean, it's just stuff that is so in your context. If someone is a developer and has an application before you, you cannot talk to the developer outside of the hearing. You shouldn't, okay? Now, the reason is that could prevent you from voting. It could be prejudicial to consideration. It has to, now, let me be more, it has to be on the thing that's pending. It doesn't mean you can't have a relationship with people who do business in Clermont. It does mean that if they have an application, you can't talk to them about it without it being in front of the board. There are exceptions because, especially in small towns and cities, which frankly I don't consider Clermont small, but Howie in the Hills would be small, okay? They don't want to prevent members of the public from interacting with people like you know? So they passed a statute that says that we can have an ordinance or resolution that removes that presumption of prejudice if you do have ex parte communications, so long as you give full disclosure at the meeting of what you discussed. So that's something that I think is usually a good idea. The only problem with it is that it may encourage more ex parte communication because you think, well, I can just disclose it at the meeting and then it'll be okay, but there's still a question that lingers. So as a best practice, I actually like it. I think you probably should adopt it if you don't have it already, but try not to do it. Go ahead.
Oh, you know I was asking you this question. So a lot of times we go to city council and we always hear one or two councilmen or women say, just want to disclose I met with the developer or applicant.
Yes.
By them saying that, they could vote.
It's supposed to remedy the prejudice. And so the idea is that now everyone does know what's been discussed. It's a conversation I've had with people.
So, like, for example, just for an example, tonight, I went to the site. I'm sure the commissioners went to the site.
Right.
We weren't in discussion with nobody because it was closed.
Yeah.
Or even if it was open, we just went to the site. Is that allowed?
It's not a best practice insofar as if you rely on that, it's not evidence. It's not evidence in the hearing.
No,
Does
it's
that
not
make
evidence,
sense?
but at least we know. For example, this is what started 3 years ago. Okay, a traffic study came in on a property. And on this property, I questioned the traffic engineer. Traffic engineer didn't even know if a road was a dead end, or if it's a one-way, or if it's a two-way. How could I go off an expert if he wasn't on location, and he's just going by a traffic study that was close to 6 years old?
Well, you have to. Now, you are
If I-
bound
I'm
by
sorry.
it's up to whoever it is to challenge the efficacy of the evidence. If someone wants to oppose it, that's the burden on them to say, look, this isn't competent substantial evidence because it's all wrong. But when you get a traffic study and there's nothing else that says anything otherwise, that's the evidence. Now, if you have something else, if there's some other piece of evidence that, it could be a member of the public says something. That could be something that contradicts. You hang your hat on it. Now, you'll see if at the very bottom of this slide, page 5, I say if a decision is based on personal knowledge, it has to be explained. So if you are driving by somewhere and you're seeing something, that has to fully be put on the record. It's like the ex parte stuff. And if someone wants to challenge that, let them. But at least then you can be cross-examined on it. Someone can ask you questions. You'll never be a witness. You guys are not witnesses. But at least then it gets it out there and they can talk about it if they want.
All right, please bring some.
But you shouldn't be going around the sites and doing soil samples.
No,
that's
I'm talking about drive-bys.
It's the same idea. It's just a different degree, right? It's a personal investigation.
So what you're telling me, we have to go by just the packet planning and zoning gives us. That's what you're telling me.
No, I'm saying that if that's the only evidence you get, then that's what you have to go by. Yes.
So we're not allowed to Google Maps, use Google Maps or anything like that.
That's a more complicated question. Because there is this idea, at least in regular courts, of what's called judicial notice. And so courts are able to take notice of things that are incapable of dispute. Calendars, farmers' almanacs have been held, like when the sun goes up and when that's been held, that you can do things that are in a newspaper. Sometimes you can take judicial notice of that. Google Maps is still under debate, so I don't know. I don't think you can in your
Okay,
meeting.
on the same page, under example, I'm a little confused there because we were told in the past we were not allowed to base a judgment on traffic.
Well,
And I'm looking at this, it says,
I'm just giving you an example.
well, that's an example.
Yeah.
But according to this example, it looks like we could approve or deny on this example.
No, I'm not saying that.
Then what are you saying?
Well, first of all, if you want to know what you can base decisions on, I encourage you to look at this right here,
Okay, that's jumping ahead. Okay, no
No,
problem.
I'm going way back, and that's compatibility, density, intensity. Intensity might incorporate traffic, transportation. The city transportation system or streets must be of sufficient width and capacity.
Correct.
Now, traffic counts are a little bit different. Some of the mechanics of what you might consider. So, for example, there's things that you consider at site plan you do not necessarily consider on a rezoning. But as you can see, it doesn't really limit what you can look at when determining is something desirable at a location. That's kind of for you to decide.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll agree to disagree.
What are you disagreeing about?
I'm confused.
Well, let's say that there's a
I'm
development.
very confused because there's a lot of things that come across this desk, and I know for a fact that developer or that applicant is going to cause a gridlock somewhere. And then somebody down the road is going to need an emergency vehicle to go down, and they're not going to be able to help that individual. And then that's what I try to base my vote on, but according to certain individuals, I'm not allowed to vote on traffic density.
Well,
That's what I'm looking for
you have to look
clarification,
at
sir.
you have to look at the evidence, is all I'm saying.
Okay.
So if the traffic study says everything's hunky-dory, there will never be a problem here, unless there's a conflicting traffic study, that's the evidence in the hearing. Or base your vote on something else that's in the evidence.
I know,
Dirty
Counselor, but
secret.
it's just, we'll talk after this.
Okay, I'm joking
I
with
don't
you,
wanna
but
keep-
yeah.
I know you are, I just don't want
Okay.
my commission, we'll talk after the meeting then.
Okay.
And
I
I think,
am allowed to talk with you after the meeting, correct?
Yes.
Because I just put it on record.
and I think too, that I was going to pass this out if people wanted it, but the county has on their planning and zoning website some really interesting bullet points. It's out there just for the public even, but I think it's really helpful for commissioners as well. And one of the bullet points talks about how local governments cannot hold a developer responsible to correct transportation problems that already exist.
Oh, well, that's talking about conditions. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so, I think all of this discussion is really helpful because it helps. Yes, it's going to muddy the water a little bit, but it's bringing to light the realities of what we are required to consider,
Right.
what we shall consider, what we really, in some cases, cannot consider, to help us through that decision-making process. And it helps the citizens understand, too, what the state of Florida, being a heavily property right state, has put in place for, and not just Clermont, every planning and zoning commissioner board is and city council for that matter, is having these same kind of conversations to a different degree. But because of the intensity maybe of our development in the past, say 10 years or so in Clermont, we're seeing it more and more and talking about it more and more.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, there are places, I won't name the municipality, but I represented a developer who was under review, and basically what they tried to do is they tried to condition approval on us fixing a pre-existing traffic problem. Now, you are allowed to request, a turn lane or something like
Mitigation,
something
yeah.
new to deal with the impact, but in any event. All right. this is big too. So I often tell people that as a city attorney, two of the non-negotiable things that you really have to know about is sunshine law and public records law. So sunshine law requires that all meetings of a public board be conducted in the open with reasonable notice to the public. And usually what reasonable notice means is if you want to have a special meeting, you've really got to give 3 days or so at least. A lot of people say, well, isn't it 7? Isn't it? No, it's not 7. There's a Florida statute that says 7 days for state agencies. We are not a state agency. And so there is case law that talks about what's reasonable. Now, you can't ambush people unless it does say for a special like city council meeting, then you can do it. Oh my gosh, 24 hours. But that could be a sunshine issue. In any event, the sunshine law is triggered when as few as 2 of you discuss or respond to issues that may come before you on a board. So if you want to discuss the St. Louis Cardinals, if you want to discuss, SpaceX, whatever it is, that's okay. What you can't do is talk about things that will come before you or might come before you, okay? Outside of a public meeting, which means it's got to be noticed and the public has a right to be heard. I just listed telephone calls, posting boards, Zoom. It applies to all these things. It doesn't matter whether it's on the phone. It doesn't matter if it's Facebook. So if there's a post on Facebook and board member A has a post and says, I believe in whatever, another member of the board is not allowed to respond to that. Now, all of you could post your opinions separately on your own things, but you cannot respond on the forum, if that makes sense. And so there's examples where you'll see gatherings of boards in big rooms with other boards and things like that, at legislature days, all that kind of stuff. And sometimes when someone gets up to make a position statement or say something, the others might walk out. They don't have to do that. It's not a violation of sunshine to sit and hear someone else say something. It's a violation to respond to it. So if, for example, our 5 city council members went up to Tallahassee and we're all in a room talking to our local legislators about needs of the city, if one of them speaks, that's fine. If the second one doesn't like something the first one says and then says, you know what, I think, then we've got a sunshine issue, just for example. So same thing applies to y'all. And so yeah, could you send an email to everyone else saying your position on something that's going to come at the next meeting? Yes. Should you? No. Because it invites a response, it sets a precedent. Who's going to be the first to get the email out next time, right? So I only say that to illustrate what the rule means and what it doesn't mean. You can't use third parties, so you can't use me as a go-between to express, poll, go ahead.
So what if you wanted to share information?
Don't forget your mic.
What if you wanted to share information? So full disclosure, the other day I sent an email out to the mayor, the council, the city manager on the Community Planning Act of 2011.
Okay.
Because it gives a lot of power to the local governments and the cities in terms of overdevelopment, planning, transportation, and things like that.
Doesn't matter. So you are not bound by sunshine with a member of another board. So you can say whatever you want to a city council member. You just can't talk to them.
Okay, so if I have more information on how other counties are handling overdevelopment, can I share that tomorrow?
Send
or-
as many emails as you want to members of the city council, the city manager, Mr. Henschel. He doesn't get emails for anything else. And but it's not to be too flip, but yes, you can send it to anyone you want. In fact, and I just want to illustrate this for academic purposes, you could even send that email out to the rest of the board. You just shouldn't. It's not a good image under the sunshine law. People might accidentally respond to it and then create a sunshine violation, but it doesn't apply to members of different boards.
So I can send it out to all the council
Correct.
members.
But also dangerous for them, right? Because what if one of them responds and then another responds.
Right,
Now, they
second.
know the sunshine law, but, I think.
How do
But-
I get that information to somebody then?
Send it.
Just send it?
Yeah.
So even if I don't get a response, I know you got it, you might just not be able to reply to it.
I
Yeah,
think
but let me be clear, you really should not be emailing the rest of the
Oh, I
board.
wouldn't.
Right,
This was
but
going
I-
to the city
But
council
it doesn't
and mayor.
apply to the city council. You can, any one of you can talk as much as you want with people on the city council.
Okay,
Sunshine only applies to members of the same board.
okay,
Yep. Because you deliberate together, you don't deliberate with the city council.
okay.
So if he wanted to share something with the rest of the commission, he would do something like Mr. Baines is doing and do it in the open in front of the public, correct?
I mean, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Do you understand that, Commissioner
I
Sedona?
don't, I mean, is there something that, is there a process something that I found out over 2 days of research and talking to other people that I could share here, or I can't?
You can share here in a public meeting.
In a
Right.
public meeting?
Yeah, as long as
Right.
it's a public meeting.
That's a good way to
You
say it.
just can't, I mean, again, I don't want to confuse anybody. You technically could send that information to the board. You just shouldn't, because this board,
Right.
okay? Because it's not at a public meeting. Even though it's technically allowed, they might accidentally respond and create a sunshine violation. So my advice to you is just don't send anything that might come in front of the board or be relevant for the board's consideration to members of the board.
Okay.
You can send that to the city council or anyone else
Because
you
part
want.
of my responsibility is to provide my own set of guidance to the city council and the mayor, and by doing
Well, you do
this-
that through your decisions here.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Um,
the other,
practice to send it individually to them, not as a group.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, if you are going to send your opinions to the city council, definitely do it individually and not as
all
a
right, so
group.
instead of a one large email, it's
Well, what
gonna
I
be-
do, when I do it, I BCC everybody. You know, if I send council to the whole city council, I don't allow that for that situation.
Okay.
That
So
makes
by
sense.
setting up the email through a BCC, that's good, because then they don't see it.
I would prefer that.
So the other only concern I have probably is the shortest term resident of Clermont. I'm only here 7 years. I find it very beneficial to myself to walk a piece of property that we're going to take a look at, just so I can familiarize myself. There are things that are in these packages that you don't see the surrounding neighborhood.
Okay.
You
Well,
know,
let me give
that's
you.
how I found out that there was what we thought to be a daycare on Mineola Street, because I started,
Well, ask them. You know, ask them questions to get evidence. In other words, let me give you maybe this will help if I give you a comparison. Let's say that we have a jury trial, and it's a bathroom renovation. It doesn't really matter what it is. Although I had a bathroom renovation trial in September, so it's on my mind. We won. But the judge, or maybe the jury wants to go see what that bathroom looks like. Maybe they want to, the pictures aren't good enough. We hear from one side what happened in the bathroom, we hear from the other side, and pictures may stink. In that case, that might be a good thing for a jury, what's called a jury view, because then the actual fact finders can go see what the bathroom looks like. If a juror actually does that without being allowed to do it by the judge, that juror gets kicked out. It's a mistrial. I don't know if you saw the movie Juror Number 2. That's real. I mean, that's the case here in Florida. You can't just do that. It goes for you too. And so if you have something on a site, I mean, I can't endorse it, but let's say you do, and you tell me to go pound sand with my advice, then when someone's up here, I would ask them questions about what you're concerned about, so that you do have evidence on the record to justify without doing something. And I believe me, I understand your concern, and I get where you're coming from. When I was a prosecutor, I went out and would do site visits myself to gather evidence, and I wondered, how could a jury figure how the battery happened if they can't see the situation? But that's the way our system works.
And I think that this goes to the point, and staff has brought this up on multiple occasions, maybe not so far with this seating of commission because we haven't really had it come up, but if we get the packet now on Thursdays, if we have, Friday and Monday and Tuesday, depending upon obviously staff availability, to meet with Mr. Henschel or Mr. Cruz to ask those questions and ask for, can I see a map, an official city document of the zoning? So it's not you are interpreting something that you found online that may or may not be legitimate or accurate that could call into question, but the official city zoning map that city staff has, that Mr. Henschel has hanging in his office. Or can you tell me what, please provide with me what businesses are next to north, south, east, and west to this property?
I actually think that's a great point, Mr. Chair. And what I would say, because I think that is a good point, is if there were things that you, as individually or as a commission, thought would be helpful in making your determination, I would let staff know that in the future, maybe having a zoning map handy is actually a very useful thing for your hearings. I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, actually, that makes a lot of sense.
And I just think that, because we're not restricted in what kinds of questions or conversations we can have with staff to collect information and data to help us make a decision or formulate questions to ask. And that would potentially maybe alleviate some of those. I get going out. I did the same thing when I first was appointed to a planning commission, 20 years ago in Wisconsin, and our city attorney was like, unless you can tell me without a shadow of a doubt that you're going to walk every single item the exact same way, spend the exact same amount of time, take the same notes, obviously I couldn't guarantee that. And so therefore it calls into question, are you treating one versus the other differently? And I think oftentimes we get judged perception and reality, and right or wrong, because we're in this position, this role, perception does come into play, and we have to just be cognizant of that when we go about our decisions, and including everything we do up to the meeting on Tuesdays at 6:30. Sorry.
Yeah. No. So the next point that I think is important in Sunshine is, this happens in a lot of local governments, someone might get caught up as a third party, because different board members might talk to the same person, and then you've got a sunshine violation if that person says what the other is, if you guys telegraph each other's votes or opinions to some third party or upcoming city business in the city council context, you're not allowed to do it, even through a third party. It's one thing, you certainly can't do it in direct communications, but even through a intermediary, it's not allowed. I also want to talk to you about 286.0114, which does require public input at meetings. This does not convert everything into a public hearing necessarily. So at our hearings and at city council meetings, I think I've learned that we're accustomed to everything essentially is a public hearing. That is not required under Florida law. So what you do have to allow is if there's someone in the public who wants to talk about something, they do have a right to be heard. Now, in a lot of cities, what they do is someone will have to come up to the clerk or someone, and they keep the list of the people who want to be heard on item 1 or item 2. And the difference between that and a public hearing is when we announce, all right, everyone, this is a public hearing. Now's your chance. Come up. You've got 3 minutes. Now, having everything as a public hearing, you can't go wrong, because you're definitely giving the public the right to be heard. No one can argue. Sometimes it might extend things because it might give someone who's just sitting out, they weren't intending on speaking, they didn't care, but now they're ready to go, So, it's optional. And the way I see it is it's kind of in the discretion of the chair, and I'm fine with whatever, but I just want to talk to you about what that distinction means for your own knowledge. Now, when you don't follow the Sunshine Law, there are penalties. If you don't have intent, you could be fined. You're not going to go to jail if it's not intentional. In other words, there's a good record, a long record of unintentional sunshine violations in this state. But if they are intentional, that's criminal, and they can be prosecuted. There was a recent case in Nassau County where someone was prosecuted for destroying public records and committing massive sunshine violations over a long period of time. That person resigned and came to a deal with the prosecutor to avoid incarceration, but it was really surprising. Oh, you haven't, we'll talk about that. All right, so our public records law is in Chapter 119. We are getting towards the end. What is a public record? A record is something that is made or received pursuant to a law or ordinance, or, and this is the key, is made or received in connection with the transaction of official business. So if you and Kurt are texting about something that's coming before a board meeting, that is not a text that is pursuant to a law or ordinance. There's no law or ordinance commanding you to send that text message and talk about the meeting, but it is made or received in connection with the transaction of official business. So whether that's your personal email or a personal phone or however it is, it's a public record. So when we get a public records request for those things, we have to provide them. It is also things that are used to perpetuate, communicate, or formalize knowledge. So if you type your notes, that is a public record. If you write and scribble things on Post-it notes, what the law says is that's not intended to formalize and perpetuate knowledge. Those are not public records. So you'll notice a lot of city attorneys, county attorneys scribbling notes on Post-its. They keep huge Post-its and they just keep doing it. It's because they're trying to prevent the creation of public records. But in any event, the point, though, is it's very wide. This is an extremely strong public records law, even compared to the vast majority of other states. And it includes all the things I put here, emails, documents, books, and so on. There are some exemptions from things that are public records. I'm not even going to go into them because I don't want you thinking that any apply. The public has a right to see things, and just like with the Sunshine Law, there are penalties, fines, depending on intent. Do you have any questions about that? Okay.
I do have a question on the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan, all right, regarding parking, all right, parking calculations, are they required on a comprehensive plan?
No.
And that's in,
I mean, parking
law?
requirements, parking,
like, for example, if somebody comes and they want to rezone something,
mhm.
and we don't have exactly the amount of parking spots they're supposed to have, like, I'm not allowed to bring up a previous case, but there was one that I was in question, all right, that there wasn't sufficient amount of parking, but then I found out there was. And I'm like, I don't understand. There's like 5 restaurants. And how could it be sufficient amount of parking? So, I mean, that's what I'm asking. And if you're telling me we don't take consideration of parking on something like that, then I'm confused.
Well, I guess maybe I'm getting caught up with the exact words. I'm just saying that in determining and creating or amending a comprehensive plan, no, you don't put parking calcs in there. But if you're talking about when you're deciding whether something is consistent with the comprehensive plan, do you look at whether it's sufficient parking or not? Is that your question?
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, for example, if they're changing density, or they're changing changing like the norm of having several restaurants into 5 restaurants. I mean, we don't take in consideration on the parking
For
if they're
CUP?
changing the density.
For a CUP?
Yeah,
You are allowed to take transportation into account. You are allowed to take intensity into account.
that's why I'm asking this question, because that's what you stated before.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know that I would, there are questions about parking that are not necessarily CUP questions, you know,
Okay.
like, should that parking space be here or there, for example?
I'm not
you know.
saying that.
Yeah.
I'm just saying the amount of parking spaces. And I know they won't have a building permit if they don't have accurate amount. But we would like to see exactly, for example, if you have a land, all right, let's say 100 by 100, and then you put a building, I'd like to exactly see where you physically could have all these parking spots you're required to be on the land. That's my question.
Correct, correct. So the fundamental question is based on use. To the extent the parking affects that, that's a part of your consideration.
Okay, thank you.
I welcome any other questions.
So the question comes about in regards to Facebook. We have some councilmen that provide summaries of certain meetings. Are we allowed as a resident, since I'm a commissioner, and she's, or he is a councilman, there's two that provide summaries, are you allowed to comment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. What you are not allowed to do is if one of them was providing a summary of your meeting, you would not be able to respond to that.
Got it. Okay.
And I think too, it kind of goes back to the one of my favorite quotes about the ethics, the Florida statutes on ethics. That section starts out: "A public office is a public trust," and it just really goes back to right or wrong, again, perception versus reality. But because we've volunteered and signed up for this position that is different than we're the only 7 in the city of Clermont who have this title, who hold this role, it comes with that responsibility sometimes of realizing that while we don't give up our right to speak or right to have an opinion, it's how we present that, or where and when we present that, and how that could be perceived in terms of being fair and impartial, to use legal terms, to all applicants who come before us. You know, if we make a statement that I will never vote for donut stores.
That's bad. Can't do it.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
But that could
Or
be
storage,
somebody
or storage,
or storage.
or-
I was trying to use something that we've never had before us. So
Well, no, I'm
but-
just saying what I've seen.
Yeah.
Since I've been here.
But if we
you
make,
can't prejudge anything.
I was gonna say, if we start making very explicit statements about a particular type of development, or even a rumored development that's
Right.
coming, that we start making statements out there about that development and what it could do, or what you would do for it, or what you would look for, I think we potentially run that risk of someone calling that into question, and it puts our attorney in a position where he has to defend us, or you have to defend yourself. And certainly as the chair, I would never want to see someone come up here and berate you as a commissioner because of something you said or did, and calling into question your integrity based off that. So I think it goes back to what Mr. Wall said from the very beginning of, like, just think about what it is that you're saying or doing, and how that could have that effect, I guess, is the
it's
advice
just-
I always was given, and maybe
It's the position
I try
of
to
trust
do as well.
idea, because you have to be impartial, you've kind of given up some discretion about what you can prejudge in public. Because people have to be able to come here to this podium and know that they're going to get a fair hearing. And especially on some of the big stuff that's coming this way, I mean, they'll do the research. They'll find out what you've said. It's just the nature of the development that's now here is very different than what was 30 years ago, so. That's all I have for you.
Wonderful, thank you. And I'm just going to, for the record, hand out this is just taken directly from the county's website for the Did You Know document, and I've given one to our clerk here as well. Can I just ask too, can we make sure Mr. Waugh's presentation and this handout get uploaded to the meeting packet online, so that people can go and find that information, so that we don't have to do a special records request or FOIA request for it if it's already there and we distribute it. I think just having it on that website would be helpful, since we distribute it and talked about it tonight. Okay? Yes?
Sorry. It's based on what I do for a living, and Brian is also a broker. I'm a broker. If I had, and this goes back to the ethics, if I was hired by a developer and that item comes, I'm just saying because
Good question,
I
yeah.
haven't had that yet.
Yeah.
So
I
I come
have had
here.
this happen,
You've
so,
had, right?
yeah.
And I've had stuff at the county level, but not you know,
Yeah.
not city. So I want to make sure that I'm ethically, like, I want
Yeah.
to be ethical. So do I say, I'm working on this?
Here's
or-
what I would
Thank
say.
you.
First, let me give an example, all right? Then I'll answer, because I can't answer anything directly. I'm a lawyer. The example that came before me recently was a realtor who always works with a developer, and he was going to vote on approving the development, or, you know, whether, and I was like, his question to me was actually a really good one. It's, you know, I haven't been hired yet. I'm like, well, have you worked with him before? Yes. Is it a good chance you'll be working with him on this stuff? Are you like his guy? He said, yeah, probably most of it. I said, then you can't. You know, that is a special benefit, okay? Because it's sufficiently tangible enough. On the other hand, if it's someone where, you know, it's highly speculative that they're, even though you know the person or have worked with the person, but it's highly speculative and you genuinely don't know, then you can. But if you have a reasonable basis to believe that you are going to get a special benefit, you do have enough people, if everyone shows up, to have quorum, and I think that is sufficient to constitute an abstention.
Okay, so then that was my question, because you said by law you have to vote.
Correct.
But I have to.
Unless you abstain.
Unless I
there's a
abstain.
legal basis for you to abstain, which would be a conflict of interest.
And I state why.
Correct. And you have to
then-
state why
Right.
on the record, fill out the form, you're done.
Okay, just want to make sure. Perfect.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Waugh, for this. I think it was incredibly helpful for us and for the public to even understand and hear a little bit more about laws and regulations related to Planning and Zoning Commission and just sunshine and ethics in general. Is there any other non-agenda items that need to come before the commission? Seeing none, I would take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Motion and seconded by Kramer and Nemec. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye. Chair votes aye as well. Meeting adjourned.
Nemec. Right. Oh,
That's my son. Nemec. Good. What did you do?
I thought it sounded with the small emphasis. No, it's not a name if. You know, Kramer, you're starting to act like.